everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to today's On the Beat segment brought to you by Ingles. Where to start? A little bit of review on the Kentucky game, a little bit of looking forward to the Florida game, the immediacy of the bye week, and what Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs are going to work on. You know, I've got a story up I did today. So much of Saturday night's attention was paid to the play calling, the rain, what the players had to say, what the fans had to say. The fact that there were boos in Sanford Stadium, regardless of where they were aimed at, was curious for a college game. Kind of expect to hear that in the NFL, but you don't necessarily expect that in college. But you got it in Sanford Stadium, a cold, windy, rainy night. Most of the interaction coming from the student section, students making it very clear that they were upset with the play calls. Kirby Smart, Jake Fromm, Jake in particular saying, hey, I don't know if you've ever tried it, but if you've never tried to throw a ball in the rain, in the wind, you may want to try it sometimes because it's pretty hard. And Jake was an effective and efficient 9 for 12, 35 yards, 4 passes going to George Pickens downfield. Georgia only needing to throw the ball once in the second half. And as Kirby explained, when you throw the football, you've got to get a good grip on it. You got to make a good throw. The guy's got to catch it. The guy's got to secure it. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a forward pass. Whereas with the run, you hand it off, and you're handing it off to a guy like Brian Harrion or a DeAndre Swift, some reliable ball carriers in a game that Georgia felt like their defense had Kentucky covered. Kirby Smart didn't think didn't think that Kentucky was going to be able to move the ball effectively. I think field position also had something to do with the conservative nature in the first half. None of those drives starting outside of the Georgia 20-yard line until the second half, until the shaked punt, the defense was able to swing some field position. So still some fans upset, some fans worried, biting the nails, concerned about the Florida game. Kirby Smart says, look, don't evaluate the offense based on that game. If you do that, then you know more than I do. That's what Kirby said. You know, he feels like that weather made that game an outlier. Now, I heard a lot of people say, well, what about Florida, South Carolina? Well, I talked to somebody at the South Carolina-Florida game. Wind was not a factor, and I don't know what the temperature was, but I'm going to guess it wasn't in the low to mid-40s. I don't know what the feel-like temperature was with that precipitation and that wind and cold. I know in the press box there was more than one occasion the wind would blow our notes up. I finally had to, move back so that my notes wouldn't get, blown away. But there were those gusts, and I think that level of unpredictability took a little bit of the confidence away from the pass game for Georgia in a game where they had been working on some things, according to Kirby and Jake. They had been working on some things for the pass game, but they weren't able to get to it. Now, is that good news or is that bad news? You can say, well, it's bad news because they didn't try it out in a game, or maybe it's good news because Florida hasn't seen what this retooled Georgia pass game looks like. And I can't imagine it looks that much different than what we've already seen. And why would it when you consider that other than that game against South Carolina, Jake Fromm had been very efficient, hadn't thrown an interception all year. What went wrong against South Carolina? I don't know. Jake seemed like he was a little bit off all day. As I go back and watch the game film from that game, it looked like the snaps were low and it threw some timing off. It looked like that Matt Landers ran the wrong route, and that led to an interception. It looked like another ball hit Tyler Simmons in the hands. So is that really one turnover you put on Jake Fromm? Are we really still talking about South Carolina? Apparently so. Apparently the concerns are still there. People want to see the improvement on the field. Just hearing that Georgia's working on it isn't good enough. Kirby Smart's offensive philosophy suddenly not good enough. But yet talking with the defensive players after the game, Monty Rice says, this is the same offense that we used 2 years ago that went and played for the national championship. And I've said all along, I believe it's the players and not plays. I think it comes down to the execution, and that sounds trite, but the reality of it is if you look back at some of those runs, and I think Mason had a good video of this on his Twitter account, when George Pickens throws the crackback, when Charlie Warner and Eli Wolf seal, suddenly the DeAndre Swift runs go from 7-8 to 23-39. So a lot of it has to do with the perimeter blocking. It sounds really boring. People don't want to hear that. I think there's a segment of the Georgia fan base that wants to be LSU or Alabama secretly. They want those pinball offenses. They want to see a lot of points scored. And they're not seeing it from Georgia. And here's the thing. You're not going to see it from Georgia with the personnel that you have right now. I'm going to slow this down for people who don't understand what the problem is. I think it's really simple. I really do. So you go into this season and you know that you lose your top 5 pass catchers from a year ago. People don't want to hear it because there's all these 5 stars. Oh, but there's all these guys with 4 and 5. Well, there are. Okay. All right. So you want Georgia to reload and be just as good in the pass game without their top 5 receivers. I would tell you I don't think that's very realistic, and I don't think there's a very strong rationale behind that. But yet and still, there are going to be some people who say, we think you should be just as good even when you lose your top 5 receivers. All right, let's hit the reset button, and let's look at who those top 5 receivers should be. Number 1, Lawrence Cager was a huge graduate transfer from Miami. Now, Lawrence hadn't had more than 20 catches in a year, but he's got a lot of talent, and he's on the Senior Bowl radar. You know what else Lawrence Cager has? A separated shoulder. He'd been playing with a separated shoulder. He also suffered bruised ribs and was knocked out of the South Carolina game. So let's just put a check next to Lawrence Cager. How about Demetrius Robertson? Now, there's a flyer. There's a guy that was a freshman All-American out at Cal. He transferred back to Georgia last year, didn't catch a pass because he was behind all those NFL receivers. But what about Demetrius Robertson? Did you see him get caught from behind? You know what I see in practice? I see athletic tape going down the back of his hamstring. Demetrius Robertson is not 100%. So we've got Cager with a separated shoulder. We got Robertson with a hamstring. What about Tyler Simmons? He's a guy that Kirby Smart said he was probably the only guy who had a position locked down as a starter before the season began. And Simmons is a guy that waited his turn. He's the leading returning receiver. You know what else Tyler Simmons has? He's wearing a shoulder brace, folks, because he's also injured. So we're talking about 2 senior receivers with Lawrence Cager and Tyler Simmons. We're talking about Demetrius Robertson, a junior with a hamstring. That's 3 of your top guys that are injured right now. So who do you turn to? Well, you turn to George Pickens and you turn to Dominic Blaylock. And those 2 freshman receivers are indeed in the top 4 or 5. But I would suggest to you that having your top 3 most experienced receivers injured right now plays a role. Now, it's not an excuse. People, everybody's got injuries. Well, sure they do. But where do you have the injuries? Some positions you're able to sustain them better than others. The receiving core, and Kirby Smart said this 2 weeks ago, is the one spot you really didn't have the depth to be able to handle these receivers with injuries. Oh, yeah, by the way, Kearis Jackson started at slot, broke his hand. Yeah, he's just now getting back. So you've had 4 of your top guys go down with injuries. Matt Landers, he's a bust. Let's call it what it is, all right? So 4 injuries, and Matt Landers is a bust. That leaves you with the 2 freshmen, Pickens and Blaylock, who I think have gotten better every week. And I think these guys are going to make a difference in November. I thought it was big that Pickens had those 4 catches. Now, you can say 4 catches is nothing, but in a game when your quarterback only completes, 5 passes to receivers, I think the other ones went to running backs. That's pretty big, and it tells me where Georgia's focus is going to be. Defenses are going to have to continue to put 2 on Pickens. Now, the question is, can Kearis Jackson step up? The question is, when does Lawrence Cager get back? To me, those are 2 very important questions. How involved can Kearis be as a pass catcher? We know Kirby loves him as a blocker. We know he was the starting slot at the beginning of the year. And then we wonder, when does Cager come back? He'll still have that separated shoulder, but you don't know how bad the ribs are. Will he be back from Florida? And then Demetrius Robertson. Is that hamstring going to be an issue all year? Or are we ever going to get to see him at top speed? So that's kind of where the receiving core is at. All that said, Georgia still has a really good offensive line and a really good backfield. So they run the football, and they're balanced. How balanced are they? They're averaging 234 yards passing and 236 yards on the ground. That's pretty balanced. They have the number 2 run offense in the SEC, just a few yards behind Auburn, but ahead of the likes of LSU, Alabama, and Florida. And just for fun, I grabbed some pretty basic stats before the show started. I look at the passing game, And LSU's throwing 385 yards per game. That's pretty impressive. Bama's at 347. Then you got to drop down. Florida, 277. Georgia, 234. Now we look at the run game. Georgia, 236. Alabama, 166. Quite a drop-off down to LSU, 151, and Florida, 142. So Georgia averaging about 40 yards more per game than the Gators, doing it on the ground. Pass defense, Georgia tops among those four teams. Not really that close. Alabama second among those four teams. Third, Florida. Fourth, LSU. Poor pass defense. Vanderbilt scored 38 points on LSU. Be interesting to see what Alabama does against LSU and how healthy Tua Tagovailoa is in that game. Run defense, Georgia tops among those four teams, followed by LSU, followed by Florida, followed by Alabama. So you've got a Georgia team with a personality of power football and good defense, and for the most part, efficient pass game, other than the South Carolina game. If you take the South Carolina game out. Now, what's happened is you can't take the South Carolina game out. Now that we've seen it happen, we suddenly realize that, yes, Jake Fromm is capable of a bad multi-interception game. I think he had two interception games before this. This is the first 3-interception game of his career. I think I would safely predict it will be his last. Could be wrong on that, but I just can't see a set of circumstances like we saw in that game against South Carolina. A chippy South Carolina coming off a bye week at that. Now you've got Florida coming off a bye, Georgia coming off a bye. I kind of like where Georgia sits right now. And I like where they sit because I felt like the win over Kentucky was galvanizing. And what I meant by that was it was one of those slug it out, you had to be there, that game in the rain, the players will never forget it, scoreless first half, getting booed by their own fans. Let me tell you, that's time to circle the wagon. That's when those players look each other in the eyes and say, we're playing for each other. We don't care what anybody on the outside says. We got to care what each other says. We got to execute the game plan. They're saying right now, those Georgia players are saying, nobody believes in us. Florida is ranked ahead of Georgia right now. I don't think the Gators should be. If I'm not mistaken, they went down to the wire against a Miami team that just lost to Georgia Tech. I'm still trying to figure out what Florida's done that's so magnificent. Now, they did make some good halftime adjustments, I felt like, to beat South Carolina, but I didn't feel like South Carolina was going to pitch a perfect game 2 weeks in a row. They had all the fairways and the greens against Georgia. I just don't think South Carolina is a good enough team to play at that level with that type of emotion 2 consecutive games. And sure enough, we saw some Carolina turnovers. We also saw some penalties go against Carolina that were pretty big. A missed false start on a very long run, as well as an illegal pick play on a Gator touchdown. Muschamp not happy. Yet and still, my feeling coming out of that game was Carolina and Florida are pretty equal teams. Whoever plays better that day is going to win. Florida played better at South Carolina. My feeling watching Georgia and Carolina was Georgia did everything they could to lose that game. Really, 4 turnovers and 2 missed field goals. I just don't think we're going to say Georgia and 4 turnovers and 2 missed field goals in the same sentence in the same game, probably for quite some time, as long as Kirby Smart wants to be at Georgia, as long as he feels like his program is behind him. And that's going to be important moving forward as well. Right now, there's some people that have been jumping off the bandwagon. That has been very interesting to me. Now, some people have explained to me that I don't understand the history, that because this and that happened under Mark Richt. I didn't think Mark Richt mattered what he did as a head coach. I didn't think that really had much to do with what's going on right now. I didn't realize that factored in to how Kirby Smart was coaching and the current players on the team. But the fans have that memory, and the fans, they're a little gun shy. The hand on the hot stove, right? Being a Georgia football fan, you probably feel like you've seen that act before. I'll just tell you this, and this is different, and it's a different era, and it's 21 years later, and I really try not to talk anything about Tennessee because they don't matter. But when I covered that program in 98, all I heard all season long in 98 was, you don't understand, Fulmer's going to blow one of these games. You don't understand, Tennessee's not going to win the SEC champ. All the Tennessee fans, they had the same sort of doubt. You know what? That Tennessee team won the national title. They won a couple games they probably shouldn't have. Probably shouldn't have beat Arkansas, and they really didn't play that well against Mississippi State. Their coordinator, Cutcliffe, cut out before the national title game, and they had to win it with a different guy subbing as the play caller. So they had adversity too. But that whole season, the reason I'm bringing it up was their fan base jumped off 2 or 3 times, just like I'm hearing a lot of Georgia fans. And I don't get it. I don't get it because Kirby Smart, I think, has proven a lot to you. I think he's shown you he has the game plan to beat Alabama. They didn't lose to Alabama because of the game plan the last 2 years. I know people don't like to talk about it. It's a touchy subject. I went at Ralph Russo, the AP national writer, who said that Georgia fans, equate almost beating Alabama. I said, no, Ralph, they don't. I've never heard a Georgia fan celebrate and say, well, we're better. I've never heard it. In fact, Georgia fans don't even want to talk about Alabama. But you need to listen now because you need to realize your head coach has got the formula. Don't be dumb, okay? Don't be stupid and think that you're going to get in a track meet and out-throw LSU or out-throw Alabama this year. You're not this year, not with the players you have, not with the team the way it's built right now. Kirby Smart can't coach. It's not PlayStation or Xbox where you can just throw some random receiver in there and he'll have a certain rating. These guys get injured, okay? Experience is a factor. Matchups matter. I think the only way Georgia could beat an Alabama or an LSU this year is with an effective ground game and very good defense. Now, that's not what you want. You want to see LSU and Alabama, and you want to see them throwing it all over the yard. Okay, not going to happen right now. Not going to happen with the talent that you have right now. That's not how this team is built. Now, maybe after this year, and I spoke with Aaron Murray about this a little bit yesterday, maybe after this year, Kirby Smart says, you know what? I need to look in the mirror and go back to the drawing board, and I need to go out and find myself another Justin Fields, and I need to go to a spread and run these high-octane offenses which do come at the expense of a defense, by the way. And all you've got to do is look at LSU and Alabama for proof of that. But maybe Georgia will do that in the future. Maybe they'll get away from the pro-style offense, and they'll get a quarterback that runs more RPOs and immediate decisions and doesn't read defenses. Maybe that's what they'll do in the future. That's not what's going to happen right now with Jake Fromm. And it's not going to happen next year if Jake Fromm comes back. This is how your team is built. It is built with a big, powerful offensive line. It is built with a deep backfield of NFL-caliber running backs. The intention is to be able to throw the ball effectively and be balanced. And certainly that's a challenge with the guys that are injured and the 5 guys that are lost. Now, if you want to say that's excuses and you don't want to hear reason, that's fine. You've already made up your mind, okay? I'm giving you facts here. I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you why Georgia's pass game isn't as good as it was at the beginning of the year when they scored on their first 3 drives of the season. Kyrus Jackson broke his hand. He's been out. He just got back. Lawrence Cager has a separated shoulder. Demetrius Robertson has a hamstring. Tyler Simmons is playing in a shoulder brace. Those are your 4 most experienced receivers. And Matt Landers is a bust. I ain't got no excuse for him. He's in his 3rd year and he's running the wrong routes. Now, maybe that'll change. Maybe Matt will come around. Kirby, you heard Kirby talk about Matt Landers in the spring. Said he flashed greatness. We saw some good things from Matt Landers, but the inconsistency gets you beat. And he's not going to be out there if he can't be consistent. I can tell you that. Kirby Smart's going to put guys out there that are going to win games for him. Listen, Tyler Simmons is still out there, but he was blocking. I don't put this on Tyler Simmons. Tyler Simmons is going to do everything that the coaching staff asks of him. I think they asked too much of him when he was wearing a shoulder brace to catch punts and catch passes and break tackles because I don't think the guy's running the same. I can't even believe how tough this guy is to be out there playing with this shoulder brace on. I mean, this ain't easy, folks. Again, it ain't video game. I think the video game has the people just convinced that, oh, well, he's had a week off. He's better now. Listen, Cager's still got a separated shoulder. I don't know how many of you have ever heard a rib, but it doesn't just go away. Now, Cager may be a little bit better when he comes back for Florida, but he's not going to be pre-injury Cager. These injuries don't just go away, okay? Understand that. And when you're a coach and you're calling plays, you're operating with the logic and the knowledge of your player's health. A lot of times, other people don't know that on the outside. They don't get that. And I don't know if any of you have coached. I've coached, and I didn't coach football, but I coached high-level travel ball. I had, softball. I had, 7 or 8 girls play for me, go on to college and play ball. We traveled around different states. I knew things about how those girls were doing, what kind of day they were having. It affected my decisions at that minor league level. We're talking major league now. We're talking Kirby Smart and a team doctor knowing how healthy these players are. We really don't know. We don't know. The part of practice that we see, I can't tell you that much. Now, I can tell you, who's running first team. I could tell you Solomon Kinley didn't look like himself by the way he was moving around. I could tell you that Tyson Campbell wasn't involved in any drill work until last week. Connor Riley's down on the field before the game. He can tell me, hey, he's warming up, but he's not working with the defense. We can give you our observations, but only Kirby knows how healthy these guys are. And he's going to game plan to that. He's not going to announce to the world all these injuries because that puts him at a competitive disadvantage. Now, if you're a fan, you go, oh, well, if I knew that. Yeah, well, if you knew that, then Florida knew that. Then Kentucky knew that. The lack of faith in Kirby Smart is, to me, alarming. It's alarming to me that Georgia fans are not as behind Kirby Smart as I feel they should be. I'm hearing all sorts of second guessing at each turn, and I don't get it. Because what's your option here, folks? You want a new coach? No, you just want Kirby to change. Well, then he wouldn't be Kirby. Do you not understand? This is who Kirby Smart is. He's told you this is who he is. You can go back and look at the transcripts. He's not misled anyone. All right? This is what Kirby is going to do at Georgia. This is what he is recruited to. This is why the players have come here, to play in this offense. Now, I do think it will open up. I do think you'll see more throwing, but you've got to have healthy players to throw to. It's not rocket science. If your top 3 or 4 receivers are injured, you're not going to throw the ball as much. You're going to be more measured with your passing game. It's not that hard. Now, you can say, well, what about just running up the... Listen, they're pounding it. Kirby believes that that's going to take effect. You go, well, why does he believe that? I don't know. Did you see the final score? Did you see the final score was 21-0? It did have an effect. They did wear Kentucky down. Now, I didn't think it worked out great against Notre Dame. And I sat right here and I said I thought that Kirby needed to be more aggressive early, but I don't think he needs to abandon the personality of his team. I don't think that, especially midseason. Are you kidding me? You're not going to just have a complete makeover midseason, and you're not going to have a makeover with Jake at quarterback and the receivers that you have right now. Okay, Jake Fromm doesn't have the mobility to extend plays like Tua Tagovailoa or to run like Justin Fields. If you want to hate him for that, that's fine. But I don't think those guys make the pre-snap reads that Jake does. The problem is the receivers have to be up to speed, or Jake can make all the pre-snap reads he wants. But if Pickens and Blaylock don't have the experience or the knowledge of the offense to stay with them, then those audibles mean nothing. Those things come with experience, and your experienced receivers have been out or injured. So it has been incongruent. I'm not sitting here telling you it's a perfect situation, but I'm telling you that Kirby Smart is managing it as well as he can with information that you all don't have access to. And he's not going to explain it. He's not going to make excuses any more than he's going to tell you that it bothered him to be booed. I mean, I forget who asked the question, but Kirby's going to play it off. Why? Because it's embarrassing to talk about it. Because he doesn't want to say to a room full of media that he heard his own fans booing him in front of all those recruits that were there on campus trying to make a decision whether they want to be Georgia Bulldogs or not. Because he gains nothing by telling you that it bothers him or that it hurts him or that it bothers the players. Oh, well, you weren't booing the players. You were booing the play callers. Well, then point at the skybox because the players here booze when they're running. I didn't realize there was a play called when they were running off the field. Okay? So you can't selectively boo. That's another thing. That's a cop-out. It's, if you want to boo, if that's where George is at as a program, I get it. I mean, if that's where you're at. But I didn't think that's where this program was. I can understand certain programs being frustrated to the extent of booing their coaches and players. You don't have to look far in this league to see some real train wrecks. But this Georgia program, these guys that are 30-6 in the last 3 years, you're booing a team that's 30-6, that's winning at an over 80% clip under Kirby Smart, that's the two-time defending SEC East Division champions. You're going to boo those guys. See, I don't get that. I don't get it. You can explain, well, I was unhappy, I was this, I was that. I don't get it. I didn't hear it. I covered Alabama Auburn last year. Auburn took the lead in the first half. I didn't hear the Alabama fans booing. I thought the play calling was bad. I didn't think they did a good job in the first half. They came back and won, just like Georgia did. Georgia came back and won, 21-0. They were never trailing that game against Kentucky that they were getting booed in, by the way. They never trailed in that game. I think people need to take a deep breath and take a look at who your coach is and decide what your future is at Georgia. And be careful what you wish for, right? Again, I covered a Hall of Fame coach at Tennessee. They said anybody can win here. Get rid of Fulmer. Bring in Lane Kiffin. 3 years of NCAA investigations. Nuclear waste. Hire the next guy, Derek Dooley. Couldn't get out of his own way. Butch Jones. Got to fire him too. Now you got Jeremy Pruitt grabbing players. You really want to bring in a different coach with a different offense? Are you that desperate? I don't think so. No, that's not what we're saying. No, we just want Kirby to change. Okay, good luck with that. You want a guy that's 30-6, that's played in a national title 2 years ago and came one quarter away from beating Alabama. You want him to change that formula. You want him to blow it up and start all over again. Come on, man. A guy that's recruiting this effectively to this scheme, you want him to change it up. You don't think there's going to be any unintended consequences? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. It's people that want to have their cake and eat it too. I was talking with a Georgia booster the other day about this. We got to talking about the Jacksonville game. And I know there's a lot of reports out on that. And I messaged McGarity earlier. He says it's still being talked about. Sounds like the people in Jacksonville are clicking their heels together, feeling like they got a deal done. They're going to take more of that Athens money and invest it down in the city of Jacksonville. Good for them if they do. It's a great deal for Florida and the city of Jacksonville. And for all the people that like to go down there, congratulations. I know you have a wonderful time, and that's a great tradition that started in 1933. I got a lot of respect for those people. When Alabama made their change to Nick Saban, they had gone through Mike Dubose, Mike Price, Fran, and Shula. They'd gone through 4 coaches, and they couldn't get it back to where Gene Stallings had it. And with all due respect to Gene Stallings, Gene lost the handle at the end. Tennessee flipped the rivalry, and Gene had some off-the-field issues. Not a lot, but the kind of issues that were going on everywhere. It wasn't, a guy signed a contract on a napkin, and Alabama didn't follow up. The whole Antonio Langham deal. My point is this. Alabama was desperate when they signed Nick Saban. They were desperate. They threw the bank at Nick Saban. They were second guessed. People said, you're ruining college football. You're making a big mistake. They threw the farm at Nick Saban, and they said, whatever you want, Saban. Tell us whatever you want us, whatever we need to do. Alabama was ready to do. They got their stadium, went from 73 to 102. They invested in facilities. They bet the farm, desperate to win. Georgia's not there yet. Georgia's not saying, whatever you need, Kirby. They're not doing it. Whatever you need, except the Jacksonville game. However you got to win. Well, we want you to throw it more. Georgia may not be desperate enough to take that next. Alabama was. They were all in. I'm just telling you. They were all in. So there's a difference there. I think Georgia's very close. But I've seen a lot of programs get very close and not quite get over the hump. I thought Auburn was very close at one point. I thought Florida State was very close under Jimbo Fisher. I thought that Ohio State was very close to just taking over, right? Georgia this year is trying to become the first team to win the SEC East Division 3 consecutive years since Steve Spurrier in the 1990s. As far as Georgia running the table and winning the SEC, you got to go back to 1998 to find a team that did that, okay? You got to go back to 1998. So why people are so broken up over South Carolina, I think it's just fear. I think it's panic. They're worried that Dan Mullen and Florida are going to reclaim the East. They're seeing Florida win some games and get some praise, and they're worried about it because Georgia hasn't looked like a four-quarter team yet. They haven't put it all together. It's a program trying to reload a receiving core that lost 5 guys to injuries at different points of the year, trying to sustain a great offensive line that's only started together once. The Great Wall only existed for one game. That's the only game you've had all 5 of those guys out there as starters, was one game. So I look at how Kirby's managed the season, and I ask myself this. If I'm Georgia, and would I take the hand that I've been dealt right now? And the hand I'm dealt right now is 6-1 with no season-ending injuries to any of my starters. If somebody would have told you at the start of the year Georgia would be 6-1, in control of their own destiny, and with no season-ending injuries to any of their starters, would you have taken that? Some people say no because they wanted this to be a perfect season. The expectations were and are outrageous, right? When you're booing a team that's running off the field in a scoreless game that's 30-6 and beat Kentucky 10 years in a row. That's how high these expectations are here. I think they need to be dialed. I think you need to dial down the expectation to the point that you're glad with wins, that you don't worry about style points, that you don't have LSU or Alabama envy. I don't think you should have Alabama or LSU envy, because you know what? I don't think either one of those teams is going to win a national title. I don't think they're balanced enough. I think Georgia has the balance to win. I believe that. Now, the receiving core does have to get better. It's not about play calls. It's about guys that can get open. Doesn't matter what play you call. Somebody's got to beat somebody. It's like a running back. He's got to beat somebody. He's got to get by somebody in open field. He's got to break a tackle. There's only so many things you can do as a play caller, and I think Jim Chaney did a good job. I think you can set up plays, right? But at some point, receivers have to get open, and running backs have to break tackles, and quarterbacks have to make accurate throws. That's what we're really talking about here. Jake's had his bad game. The only thing I'm wondering about and leery of is there more to this story? Is there something we don't know? You know, Jake was just that tick off against South Carolina. Again, I think it had to do with the snaps. I think it had to do with Javon Kinlaw beasting Trey Hill for 4 quarters. I think Javon Kinlaw is the best interior defensive lineman, and he also beat up on Alabama, by the way. So it's not just like Georgia is the only team that Javon Kinlaw has been a factor at. South Carolina can get after the quarterback. They do have a good defensive front. Okay, they're not patsies. All right, not a pushover team. As you saw, if you turn the ball over 4 times and you miss 2 field goals, you can lose to South Carolina. That's a ridiculous statement. If you turn the ball over 4 times and miss 2 field goals, you can lose to anybody in the SEC. It's not the ACC, okay? It's not the Big Ten. The bottom teams can beat you. They have teeth. They have players. They have NFL talent. They have guys that can rise up. And if you give that other team a bye week, yeah, and you turn the ball over 4 teams against a team with a bye week and you miss 2 field goals, you deserve to get beat. I think it was a good wake-up call for Georgia. Again, I don't know if you missed part of the show. I said this. I think it was, in hindsight, I think there's a silver lining. I think the silver lining is that it got the Georgia players' attention. I think they were sleepwalking through October. I did not feel like they had the edge that I saw at the beginning of the year. You know, after playing the Notre Dame with the bells and the whistles and all that, it's kind of hard to generate that excitement. You go on the road against Tennessee, you fall behind. Okay, they wake up. They beat Tennessee more decisively than Alabama did at home. Nobody wants to talk about that. All anybody wants to talk about is that Kirby needs to change play callers and offense, and you're not going to do it with the personnel that you have. Now, if you want a second guess, and let's face it, here's the elephant in the room. I'm going to call it out right now. If you want a second guess whether or not Kirby should have changed the offense and kept Justin Fields, that's going to be there for you, because Fields ain't going nowhere, folks. Ohio State's not losing. They're not going to lose till the playoff. Okay, mark it down. Ohio State is not going to lose till the playoff. Justin Fields, 50-50, he's sitting in New York at the Heisman ceremony as a finalist. So if that chaps you, you better get yourself prepared, because Fields and Ohio State are darn good. And it's not just Fields. It's the running back. It's the defense. It's the edge rusher. Ohio State is real. They are a championship contender. Now, if you believe that Kirby Smart should have fired Jake Fromm and changed the offense, then you're going to have a rough season. You've got every right to be upset if you really believe that. Personally, I thought Kirby played it about as good as he could. He played the guy in 12 games. He gave him opportunities. He practiced to play with him every week. And with the season on the line, he put the ball in his hands, and the guy didn't execute. Ohio State fans get fear. Oh, how can you say it? Because that's the truth. Now, this year's version of Justin Fields, different guy. But we're talking about last year. So is that what you're mad about? Because if that's what you're mad about, there's not much anybody can do to help you. That ship sailed. Fields decided to leave. Kirby didn't kick him off the team. He decided to leave. Kirby let him come to the Sugar Bowl, even after he knew he wanted to transfer. Did everything he could to keep the guy. Hard to keep two talented guys on your roster. Look around. Just look in the transfer portal. Look at all the transplanted quarterbacks. This is where college football is at today. Georgia got bit by it first. Case study. As Chris Fowler said, Pandora's box. And it was indeed opened up. So I can understand the Georgia fans having their feathers ruffled. You're seeing a guy that left have great success. You saw a disappointing outlier game against South Carolina, way out of character of Blankenship and Fromm. But frankly, it's kind of amazing that Fromm had that many games. 36 games? How many Jake played now? Let me think here. 24-5, 36 games, and he's got one game with 3 picks in 36 games. I mean, hell, I think Peyton Manning had 5 picks or 4 picks against Florida every year. It happens, all right? Guys have bad games. The question is, what happens now? Moving forward, what happens now? And what is the team? How does the team react? I liked the way that DeAndre Swift responded. You typically don't hear running backs speak up like that. You typically don't. But Jake's in a tough position where Jake can't say much. And let's be honest, Jake is not going to step on anybody's toes. I mean, he is the quintessential college student athlete representative. Can't imagine Georgia wanting anybody else to represent the program the way Jake handles himself with the cameras, with his comments, with the way he supports his teammates. His leadership is impeccable. But they needed somebody edgy to come out. And Monty Rice is reluctant, okay? Monty's a reluctant public figure. Sometimes he doesn't show up for interviews. That doesn't mean he's not a hell of a player. He's a great player. He just doesn't like to talk to the media. So he's not going to be the guy to make those statements, those billboard statements that everybody's going to rally around and support. No, it was DeAndre Swift. And I'm proud of DeAndre Swift, the guy that knows DeAndre. I've talked to him enough times. That's not that's not generally who he is. He doesn't want to be that guy, but he realized that somebody had to be that guy. Somebody had to say something. And so Swift put his neck out there and stuck up for his team. You know, that's what DeAndre Swift did. He is all in. And I give the guy credit because he's been nothing but a straight shooter. He told us last year before the Texas game that this year was probably going to be his last year. He could have held it in. He could have played that game, but he just shot straight, okay? It is what it is. This is Swift's last year at Georgia. Barring some change of direction, this is it for DeAndre Swift. But he's laying it on the line, right? He ain't taking his stock and going home. He's out there carrying 21 times and pouring rain for 179 yards, bouncing off tacklers, telling the world that he stands behind his play caller, that he stands behind his defense, he stands behind his offense. He's saying, and if fans don't like it, Swift says, they don't have to come. All they want to do is win games. That's all DeAndre Swift wants to do. And like I said, I'll give him credit. I wondered at the start of the year about his pitch count. I wondered how much work DeAndre Swift would be willing to put on his shoulders this season, knowing that he's got an NFL career waiting for him. Because part of the deal at Georgia is you split carries, and the backs like that. Nobody wants to, listen, no offense to Herschel, but nobody wants to be Herschel and do what Herschel did. What Herschel did is still amazing, but you're not going to see anybody break that record because nobody's going to carry the ball that much anymore. The game's changed, right? It's like pitchers. They used to throw complete games. Nobody throws complete games. Nobody does what Herschel Walker did. There needs to be a split of carries. But Swift was willing to as much work as he needed to get. And you know what? He's going to show up front and center against Florida. I thought Connor Riley had a good point this morning, this team goes as far as DeAndre Swift carries them. That's what the DNA of this team is. Now, maybe some guys will continue to emerge in the receiver corps. Maybe Kearis Jackson will be an effective receiver now that he's back. I don't know. I know he was an effective blocker. Maybe we'll see more from the tight ends. We haven't seen Eli Wolf in a while. Wolf was making a difference early in the year. He's a guy that can hit the seam. He's a guy with high 4.5 speed, create mismatches, right? Maybe Charlie Warner gets a little bit more involved in the pass game. Maybe Tyler Simmons gets that shoulder brace off. I think we're going to see more George Pickens. I think we're going to see more Blaylock. Maybe Demetrius Robertson's hamstring heals. It's a lot of maybes. But that's where everybody's at right now. I think the only program that should feel really, really good about where they're at right now is the Ohio State. That is the only program I look at that says, man, those guys are on a rail. They're happy. They're healthy. They got a favorable schedule. Everything's clicking. There's a lot of great energy in Columbus. That's the only program in the country that doesn't have some complaint or concern right now. We're at that stage of the season where everybody can look at their team and see the warts. Everybody sees the warts. So, Georgia fans, take a deep breath. Have faith in your head coach. Take a look at the direction that the program is going and ask yourself, are you all in on Kirby Smart? Because if you're not, you're not. You're all in or you're not. You're either behind your program or you're not. You're either going to trust your coach and his judgment with this bye week, or you're not. And there's some nervous Nellies out there. There's some second guessing. There's a fear the Gators are going to win in Jacksonville, only when they play 60 miles from their home. And Georgia goes 332 miles for the neutral site game. There's some fear that Georgia's going to reclaim that turf. Spurrier's thrilled. The games. Tebow's thrilled the games in Jacksonville. The Florida fans love it. They're so excited. $35 million a year going to the Florida economy. They're good times in Gainesville. And Georgia fans are afraid that they're going to go down that road again and lose control of that rivalry. That's what you're really afraid of. I know that's what you're afraid of. But talking to the players, and I'll close with this, my points, I want to get to your questions. Talking to the players, I was talking to a team that was galvanized after that game. I think I've got a good eye for this. Covered a lot of teams over the years, and I think I have a pretty good feel for where a team's at. These guys believe in each other, all right? They know they're vulnerable. They know the players that are getting singled out. They know the guys that are being criticized. They know the players that are being second-guessed. They're standing up for them. Ben Cleveland, read the Ben Cleveland story today. Ben Cleveland says, look, Jake looks shaky, but he's all right. He's a smart quarterback. It's going to be fine. They believe in each other. They got each other's backs. Monty Rice says, hey, this is the same offense we won a title with 2 years ago. Richie LeCounte says, this is what we do. We pick each other up. This is what this team is, right? They're thumb pointers, not finger pointers. That's their saying. And they're living it. And we're hearing it in the postgame. I've been around teams where the defense stunk or the offense stunk, and you could just sense the tension between the offense and the defense and even call it to the point of, well, if the offense does this or if the defense would. There's none of that at Georgia. The players are all bought into their head coach. This is what they signed up for, right? And if you're a Georgia fan, I thought this is what you signed up for with Kirby Smart. That's what I thought. I thought everybody believed in 43-year-old Kirby Smart. And you looked at, he's coached under Saban. He coached under Bowden. He spent a year under Mark Richt. He wore the silver breeches. He played in the games. He was a SEC, all-SEC academic. He's a smart guy. He handles himself well. I thought everybody was all in and trusting in Kirby Smart. It's amazing to see the doubters. It's almost like I want to take a screenshot of all these names and say, okay, now when he beats Florida, are you going to change your screen? Actually, I knew it was fine. I was never one that booed. I was never one that complained. Okay, there's going to be some of that backtracking. So it's going to happen. My thoughts. Take a look here at your comments. Look, Eric Lever says they kept the wrong quarterback. Eric, Justin Fields was welcome to stay. Kirby wanted to keep both of them. What other comments do we have here? Billy Hurley concurs. Unbelievable whining going on. It's a spoiled fan base. That's a good place to be. It's a good place to be when you boo in a scoreless game and your team's won 30 out of 35 games or 30 out of 36. That's how good it is at Georgia. You're disappointed with a 3-touchdown win. Wow. How many times do you run between the tackles? Brian Whitehead says. You keep pounding the rock. You keep moving the yards, like Kirby says. Another part you need to understand. In Kirby Smart's mind and in the offense's mind, and with the data that he has, 4 yards on first down on a run is a successful play. If you get 4 yards and you're in 2nd and 6, you're where you want to be. You're moving the chains. And you just took another pound of flesh out of that defense. You just hammered them. And you know what happens? Having talked to a lot of great running backs, including DeAndre, you know what those running backs like to do? They like to pound, and they know that when they go outside, it's there. Because that defense gets sucked in, and all of a sudden, that running back cuts outside. They set that up. Georgia needs to do more of that. A successful pound game also sets up play action. Haven't seen a lot of play action out of Georgia this year. That's been a disappointment. I've been a little surprised. Also disappointed we haven't seen James Cook more involved. Got to get a little more creative there. That's a really talented guy. That should be an extended handoff to throw to Cook in the flats. You've heard Eric Zier say the same things. What else we got here? Jonathan Silver's Kirby wants to keep the playbook hidden for this point in the season. I think to an extent, yes. But again, I think it has to do with the players and the personnel and who's healthy and information that Kirby has. Demetrius Robertson is not 100%. Anybody that saw him get run down from behind can tell you that. Okay? He's got a hamstring. Lawrence Cage has been playing with a separated shoulder. Tyler Simmons is wearing a shoulder brace. I don't want to keep going over the laundry list. The head coach isn't going to bring this stuff up. He's not going to use it as an excuse because he doesn't make excuses. But I'm telling you what's going on. I'm a guy that covers the team. I'm a guy that talks to the players. I'm the guy that's seen a lot of championship seasons. This can still be a championship season. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter whether you boo or not. It really doesn't. Those guys believe in each other. I'm just going to tell you that. If anything, the booing circled the wagon. Now, I think it was a bad look for Georgia fans. I think it hurt you in recruiting. I think it's going to get used against you. I think, you see things happen at other schools, coaches pointing or grabbing. That's going to get used against them. Being booed at home is going to get used against Georgia. These guys use everything against each other. They clip things out. That's why they got 100 assistants. The bulletin board material, it just doesn't go on the bulletin board. It goes in the mail to the recruits. So I'm thinking if you're a Georgia fan, you might want to get a clue and realize that you are part of the show. You are part of the environment. You are part of the decision. How great is that fan base? Just like there was 90,000 in a spring game, there was 10,000 booing in a 0-0 game. Good, bad. My take. Your call. Your fan base. Your program. You love it like you want or hate it like you want. I don't know how you talk to your dog at home. I don't know how many treats you give them. I don't know if you kick them when you get mad. I don't have control of that. I'm a dog lover myself, right? I'm always nice to my animals. But some people, they get mad and they yell at them. Had a bad day, yell at the dog. Oh, what's wrong with the dog? You passed gas. Oh, my goodness. He's a horrible dog, right? Georgia passed a little gas this year on the football field. They stunk it up against South Carolina. You going to put them outside? You going to yell at them? All right, get over it, all right? It's a team that's lost one game. I think they're going to beat Florida. I know Kirby's been working on this past game. They wanted to do some things against Kentucky. Mother Nature didn't cooperate, so they put it on the shelf. They'll work on it during the bye week. They'll break some stuff out against the Gators. And you know who's going to win that game? The team that plays better. The team that doesn't turn it over. That's who's going to win. I can't tell you who is going to be that team, but I can tell you that if all things are equal, Georgia should win that game by double digits. If both teams play at a B level, if both teams play at an A level, Georgia is 10 to 14 points better than Florida. But if Georgia plays like they did against South Carolina, yeah, they're going to lose. If they play like that, I don't think they will. That's what I got for you. I'm going to go to practice today. We're going to hear from Kirby Smart. He's not going to give you any answers. He's not going to tell you he solved all the problems in the world. He's going to tell you they worked hard. He's going to tell you they came back with the right attitude. He's going to tell you they're working on some separation and they're looking at some different things. And however you feel right now is exactly how you're going to feel after you hear from Kirby Smart later. I'm just going to tell you, the people that are pissed off, you're going to be mad until they beat Florida. There's nothing I can do to help you. The people that believe in Kirby Smart, they're going to be a little bit more chill, a little bit more relaxed, and probably enjoy the game in Jacksonville a little bit more. That's it for me on the Ingles on the Beat show today. I hope you've enjoyed the production. Some of you, I'm sure, did. Some of you didn't. If you want to boo, there's a comment section. I can handle it. I've been booed before. I can appreciate that. Everybody, have a great week. We'll talk to you next Tuesday.